The Abery Mansion, situated atop the highest hill in Redwood, was a local landmark. With its white stones, Gothic towers, and extensive gardens, the property exuded an old-world charm that could only be compared to grand European estates. On that day, a cloudless blue sky offered a spectacular view but also brought the intense heat of summer. At the entrance of the property, Pauline Abernathy, a woman in her 50s with an upright posture and piercing gaze, observed the hustle and bustle. Her gray hair was pulled up into a perfect bun, and her attire, despite the situation, was impeccable. "That box doesn't go to the guest room. Take it to the library," she commanded one of the movers, her voice firm and authoritative. A little distance away, Philip Hemsworth, a young man with defined muscles, tan skin, and green eyes, carried a heavy box of old books. Even under the scorching sun, his determination was evident. His dark, curly hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat, and his damp shirt clung to his body, showcasing his strength. Suddenly, he stopped for a moment, placing the box on the ground and wiping sweat from his brow. His eyes met Pauline's. She, with an assessing look, seemed to examine every detail of him while Philip tried not to show discomfort under her scrutiny. "You there?" Pauline called, pointing toward Philip. "Be careful with those boxes, they're valuable and irreplaceable items." Philip, picking up the box once more, replied with a nod, "Of course, Mrs. Abery, I understand." The other workers, sensing the tension, exchanged discreet glances. The atmosphere grew heavier with Pauline's dominating presence and Philip's raw energy. Unbeknownst to both, their destinies were about to intertwine in ways neither of them could foresee. The day continued to be hot, and the work at the Abery Mansion seemed endless. In the courtyard, dozens of boxes were stacked, ready to be transported to their respective places. One of them, adorned with golden designs and the family crest, was slightly tilted, as if about to topple over. As Philip walked by it, he tried to adjust its balance, but in a moment of carelessness, he bumped into the corner of the box. Immediately, a subtle but distinct sound of something breaking echoed. Silence fell, and all eyes turned to him. Pauline, who was already on edge, quickly walked over to Philip, her eyes burning with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" she exclaimed, pointing at the box. "Do you have any idea what was inside?" "They're antiques, family relics." Philip, trying to maintain his composure under the condemning gazes of everyone, took a deep breath. "I apologize, Mrs. Abery. It wasn't my intention." Pauline stepped closer, looking him up and down with disdain. "Apologies won't bring back what's been broken. Maybe if you took your work seriously and treated other people's belongings with respect, we wouldn't have this problem." The public humiliation made Philip's face turn red. All the workers watched, some with pity, others with discomfort, but no one dared to intervene. Pauline, feeling that she had made her point, turned to return to the mansion. But before she did, she gave Philip one last disapproving look. "Be more careful next time, or there won't be a next time for you here." Philip, still processing what had just happened, felt a mixture of shame and anger. However, instead of discouraging him, that incident ignited something within him, a flame of determination that didn't exist before. He muttered to himself, more like a vow than anything else, "I'll never allow myself to be in this position again." And with that firm resolution, he committed to changing his destiny. The night sky was starry, a blanket of twinkling points spread over the small wooden house where Philip lived. The house, situated on a quiet street in Redwood, was far from imposing like the Abery Mansion, but it was a home. The gentle sounds of crickets filled the cool night air. Philip sat on the porch, a steaming mug of tea in his hands, his gaze lost on the horizon. Dim lamps illuminated the space, casting dancing shadows on the ground. Old photos hanging on the living room wall depicted a united and happy family, including a younger and more hopeful version of himself. What if, he murmured to himself, thinking about all the choices he had made and those he still had to make. His younger brother, Michael, approached and sat beside him. "Are you okay, Philip?" Philip gave a weak smile. "You know, Michael, every time I'm on this porch, I think about how life could be different, what we want for ourselves and for the family." Michael looked at him thoughtfully. "Are you talking about what happened at the mansion today?" Philip nodded. Pauline's disdain, it was like a mirror showing me everything I haven't achieved so far. She saw in me someone small, insignificant. I don't want to be that. His brother, understanding, placed a hand on Philip's shoulder. "But you're bigger than you think. You just need to believe it." Philip looked at the stars, his eyes shining with determination. "I want more, Mike. I want Mom to be proud. I want you to have the opportunities one never had." Michael smiled. "Then go after it. You have the power to change your destiny." With those words, Philip felt a growing warmth within him, a fire of ambition and purpose. Inspired by Pauline's disdain and driven by his love for his family, he made a firm decision. He would no longer be defined by circumstances, but by his actions and determination. "I'm going to do it," Philip whispered, more determined than ever to change the course of his life. In the silent darkness of his room, Philip was immersed in books, charts, and articles scattered across his desk. A desk lamp cast a beam of yellowish light onto the documents as he delved into the complex realms of real estate and business management. Each page turned, each note taken was a step toward the dream that had begun to take shape in his mind. In a notebook, he scribbled rules for success. 1. Knowledge is power. 2. Never underestimate the value of persistence. During weekends, Philip attended seminars, workshops, and even auctions, absorbing all the information he could. On one of these occasions, he met Eldon, a seasoned real estate agent. Recognizing the young man's thirst for knowledge, Eldon offered to be his mentor. "You've got the fire, Philip," Eldon remarked one day as they walked through a newly constructed building, "but you need to understand the nuances of this market. It's not just about buying and selling, it's about creating value, seeing opportunities where others don't." Inspired by these words, Philip made a bold decision. With his savings, he founded Pinnacle Realty. The name reflected his vision to reach the peak, the pinnacle, of the real estate market. The first few months were challenging. Philip worked day and night, seeking undervalued properties, renovating them, and selling them for profit. His reputation grew not only for his savvy deals, but also for his work ethic and integrity. In a meeting with potential investors, Philip presented his vision. "The market is constantly evolving," he declared, pointing to an upward trending chart, "and Pinnacle Realty will not only keep up with that evolution, but also lead in shaping its course." Within a few years, the name Philip became synonymous with innovation in the real estate industry. His office, which was once a modest space, now occupied an entire floor of a skyscraper in the city center. With unwavering determination and a clear vision, he rapidly ascended in the business world, becoming a force to be reckoned with. In the opulent living room of the Abery Mansion, the air was heavy with tension. Persian rugs covered the floor, and portraits of past generations proudly hung on the walls. But those ancient eyes seemed to witness the storm brewing in the house. Pauline, in her silk dress and glistening pearls around her neck, stared out of the window, trying to contain the tears that threatened to escape. Her husband, Eugene, stood there, holding a leather suitcase. "Pauline," he began with a trembling voice, "we've tried. God knows we've tried, but we're simply no longer connected." She turned to him, her eyes gleaming with anger and hurt. "So, this is it? After all these years, you're just leaving?" Eugene sighed deeply, searching for the right words. "It's not just about us, it's about you, your spending, your parties, this obsession with status. It's not the life I want." Pauline felt as though a knife had pierced her heart. She knew, on some level, that he was right, but pride and pain prevented her from admitting it. "You promised me a life together, Eugene. You promised to be here. And he replied, his voice gentle but firm, but I can't be anymore. I need to find my own way. With that, he walked out the front door, leaving Pauline alone, enveloped in a vortex of sadness, anger, and denial. In the months that followed, Pauline sought solace in extravagant shopping, luxurious parties, and impulsive trips. Without Eugene's stable presence, she spiraled into a cycle of indulgence. Bills piled up, and the fortune that once seemed inexhaustible began to diminish rapidly. On a rainy afternoon, Amanda, her loyal servant and friend, approached her with a stack of bills. "Mrs. Abery," she said hesitantly, "perhaps it's time to reconsider some of your spending." Pauline looked at the papers, the weight of reality beginning to sink in. The storm in her personal life had led to a financial storm, and she was in the eye of the hurricane. The setting sun cast long shadows over the vast gardens of the Abery Mansion. But inside the opulent residence, a much deeper darkness was settling in. Pauline, once the undisputed queen of that estate, now walked from room to room, observing the deafening silence of the crisis that surrounded her. Piles of unpaid bills were scattered across the mahogany dining room table. The menacing reminders from financial institutions seemed even darker in the light of the crystal chandelier above. Amanda, the maid, watched Pauline from a distance, her face reflecting the concern and compassion she felt for her employer. Pauline picked up an eviction notice and read it aloud, her voice trembling. "If full payment is not received within 30 days, measures will be taken to repossess the property," she said, looking at the portrait of her late father hanging on the wall. "How did we come to this?" she whispered almost to herself, trying to be practical. Amanda suggested, "Perhaps it's time, Mrs. Abery, to consider selling the mansion. It's a magnificent property and would surely attract buyers." Pauline looked at Amanda, her blue eyes filled with tears. "This house is all I have, Amanda. My memories, my childhood. Every stone and every tree has a story." She paused, trying to control her emotion, "But you're right. I don't see any other way." With a heavy heart, Pauline contacted a local real estate agent and put the mansion up for sale. A for sale sign was placed at the entrance of the property, serving as a constant reminder of the Abery's precarious situation. Weeks passed, and potential buyers came and went, but none made a concrete offer. Pauline began to lose hope, wondering if she would have to face eviction from her beloved home. Every night, she walked through the hallways, touching the furniture, the portraits, and the walls, desperately hoping that someone would recognize the value and beauty of the property and rescue it from its crisis. Philip was driving through the city when his eyes were drawn to a familiar sign that seemed out of place, "For sale." He hit the brakes, looking closely. It was the Abery Mansion. The grand structure, which once appeared untouchable and eternally stable, now seemed to have succumbed to the pressures of life, just like its owner. That place held a special resonance for Philip. It was where he had endured the humiliation that ignited the fire of his determination. He remembered the time when Pauline reprimanded him and the feeling of smallness he had experienced. Now he was in a different position, with a thriving company and a life he had built from the ground up. Entering a nearby cafe, he ordered a coffee and picked up his phone, dialing the number of his trusted broker, Martin. "Martin, it's Philip. I saw that the Abernathy Mansion is for sale. I need to know more about it," he said, urgency evident in his voice. Martin responded quickly, "Oh yes, I heard. It's an impressive property, but it seems the Aberys are going through tough times. It could be a good investment opportunity." Philip sighed. "It's not just an investment, Martin. That house, that woman, they were the catalyst for everything I've built in my life. Buying that mansion would be like closing a circle." There was a pause, and Martin finally said, "I understand, Philip. I'll arrange a visit for you. But if you decide to buy, it's not just a symbolic gesture, it's a significant responsibility." Philip looked out the window at the mansion in the distance. "I know, Martin, but it's a step I'm ready to take. And so, with a mixture of determination, redemption, and hope, Philip prepared to make an offer for the mansion, not just as a trophy of his achievements, but as a testament to his journey and transformation. The real estate agency's conference room was adorned with leather armchairs and a solid oak table beneath, which a Persian rug muffled the footsteps of those present. The air was laden with tension and anticipation, and the only audible sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Pauline, dressed in her finest ensemble, appeared smaller than Philip remembered. Her features were softer and more vulnerable. She kept her head held high, but her eyes avoided any direct contact. She had not yet seen the buyer of the mansion. Philip, on the other hand, was in a well-tailored suit, a physical representation of the success and determination that had brought him to this moment. He watched Pauline from afar, the memory of their last encounter still vivid in his mind. When the broker, a middle-aged man named Eldon, announced the arrival of the buyer, Philip approached with confidence, extending his hand to greet Pauline. "Mrs. Abery," he said with a respectful nod. Pauline, upon hearing the voice, finally raised her eyes and met Philip's. For a moment, there was a recognition void. She blinked, her mouth opening slightly in surprise. "Philip," she whispered almost inaudibly. The silence between them was piercing, the tension palpable. Philip maintained his composure, though his eyes revealed a glimmer of triumph and resilience. "I've changed quite a bit since the last time we saw each other, haven't I?" he asked, his voice gentle. Pauline swallowed hard, shame coloring her cheeks red. I didn't expect it to be you," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I apologize for the past, Philip. I never imagined our paths would cross like this." Philip gave a slight smile. "Life is full of surprises, Mrs. Abery, and we all have the capacity to change." The two continued their conversation, cautious at first. But as the documents were signed, a mutual understanding and respect began to form between them, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their interconnected lives. The first rays of morning sun cast a golden light over the Abery Mansion. Moving trucks and workers filled the front area of the property, with boxes and furniture being loaded. Among them, Philip, dressed casually yet elegantly, gave instructions while looking at the old house with a fresh perspective. Inside the mansion, every corner, every detail resonated with memories of a bygone era. However, Philip was determined to bring renewal. The walls, once adorned with old portraits, now had empty spaces waiting for new stories and moments. As he walked through the main hall, Philip noticed Pauline standing near a window, her eyes lost in the vastness of the garden. She seemed like a shadow of what she once was, a strong and imposing woman. Now there was a fragility in her that Philip never imagined he would see. "Mrs. Abery," Philip began approaching slowly. "I understand how much this house means to you. It's more than just bricks and mortar, it's a lifetime of memories." Pauline turned to him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "It's all I have," she admitted with a sigh. Philip, feeling a wave of compassion, continued, "I would like to offer you the opportunity to stay here in the mansion until you find a new place to call home." Pauline stared at him, surprised. "Why?" she asked, genuinely intrigued. Philip shrugged, a gentle smile lighting up his face. "We all deserve a second chance, don't we? Plus, this house is big enough for both of us. I would be honored to have you as my guest." For a long moment, all that could be heard was the singing of birds outside. Then, Pauline nodded, gratitude evident in her eyes. "Thank you, Philip," she said, her voice full of emotion. Philip simply nodded, glad to extend a hand in friendship and understanding. The Abery Mansion, while still holding echoes of the past, was ready to embrace a new beginning. The weeks following Philip's move to the mansion were a blend of adaptation and renewal. While Philip began to settle in, Pauline's presence, though discreet, was constant, a silent reminder of what the house had once been. On a particularly sunny afternoon, the two of them found themselves in the garden. Flowers were being replanted, and the sound of the fountain served as a gentle soundtrack. Pauline, dressed in a light summer dress, was seated on a bench, gazing at the roses. Philip approached, a tray with fresh tea in hand. "I thought you might like some tea," he said, offering her a cup. She accepted it, giving a small smile. "Thank you, Philip." There was a brief silence between them until Pauline took a deep breath and said, "I've been thinking about how I treated you that day. I was wrong. I was bitter and frustrated and took it out on you, a complete stranger. It wasn't fair." Philip looked at her, surprised by the confession. "Life takes us on strange paths, Mrs. Abery. We all make mistakes." Pauline chuckled softly. "Please call me Pauline." "And yes, we do. But what touched me was your generosity. After all, you offered me shelter in this house, something I didn't expect." Philip shrugged. "We all deserve compassion." Pauline set her teacup aside and looked deeply into Philip's eyes. "I'm sorry, Philip. Truly. I hope we can leave the past behind and maybe, who knows, start a new friendship." Philip smiled warmly. "I would love that, Pauline." The two talked for hours that afternoon, discovering common interests and sharing laughter. From that day on, the beginning of an unlikely friendship blossomed, and the future seemed much brighter for both of them. The mansion, once a monument of opulence and power, had transformed into a space for reflection and growth. The corridors, which used to echo with laughter and whispers from past parties, now resonated with deep conversations and sincere moments. One afternoon, Philip and Pauline were in the library, surrounded by tall shelves filled with dusty books. They had started a ritual of meeting there every week to share stories, read together, or simply enjoy the silence. Philip, flipping through an old book, spoke thoughtfully. "This house, it has seen so much, triumphs, tragedies, loves, and losses. I used to see it only as a symbol of what I wanted to achieve, but now it's more than that." Pauline nodded. "To me, it was always a trophy, a way to show the world that I had made it. But losing almost everything made me see its true value. It's not just bricks and mortar, it's history. It's a witness to our journey." Philip closed the book and looked at Pauline. "You know, Pauline, I've learned something important from you. Humility is a hard but necessary lesson. It's not about what we have, but who we are." Pauline smiled sadly. "And I've learned about second chances from you. You could have rejected me, sought revenge, but you showed me understanding. That made all the difference." The two shared a moment of silence, absorbing the magnitude of their transformations. The mansion, with its vast rooms and lush gardens, now served as a reminder that true wealth is not measured in possessions, but in character and the connections we make throughout life. "Life is impermanent," Pauline murmured, "but what we do and how we touch others' lives, that endures." Philip agreed. "This mansion has taught us that, and I am grateful for every lesson." Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.